I quietly walked into my own store when the young clerk looked at me and said I was too old. She humiliated me, told me to leave, insisting I didn't belong there. My chest tightened with shame until one simple sentence changed everything. "Good morning, Mrs. Vera. Your office is already clean." Silence filled the room. What happened next will leave you speechless. I quietly walked into my own store.
I rested my hands on the sink and calmly looked at the mirror. The yellowish lights in the bathroom cast soft shadows. My fine wrinkles told stories of laughter and storms. I brought my face closer, fixed my bangs and took a deep breath. "Today, serenity," I murmured, as if wearing a shield. I brushed my hair with slow, deliberate movements. Each gray hair looked like a cut silver thread. I grabbed the bottle of my favorite perfume and sprayed it on my wrists. The scent of bergamot and amber rekindled memories of victories. I smiled slightly, recognizing myself completely in my own scent. In the closet, the racks displayed pieces that were once trends. I touched fabrics, comparing textures, memories and drapes. I chose a moss green silk shirt that brightened me up. A pair of impeccably tailored trousers shaped my confidence. On her feet, pumps that beat like a metronome of decision. As I was getting dressed, my phone vibrated with notifications. Messages from management confirmed the arrival of a newcomer. "Welcome, trained, eager to impress," the email said. I thought about arriving without fanfare. As I sometimes did, I liked to observe the salon from the customer's perspective. I sat down at the dressing table and picked up a discreet lipstick. The light blush on her cheeks brought freshness back to her features. Fashion is a hug, not a barrier, I repeated to myself. It was my mantra from the first dress I sold. The store had been born from this principle, and had flourished in it. I opened the drawer where I kept my notebook. There, sketches of collections and phrases for the team. "Respect wears better than any fabric." It was underlined. I remembered, feeling the phrase as an everyday promise. I closed the notebook with an almost ritualistic caress. In the hallway, I grabbed my light gabardine coat. The touch of the fabric soothed any remaining tension. I heard the sound of the kettle, but decided to skip the coffee. I'd prefer an espresso on the way. To wake up the soul, I would see the city still stretching. Like every morning, before leaving, I checked the office key. The leather keychain bore my discreet initials. I remembered the cleaning staff, always punctual. I thought I would thank Donna Rosa for a recent detail. The neatness of the shop windows had shone brighter in the last week. At the door, I breathed in the fresh air that came in through the crack. The morning smelled of old rain and clean asphalt. I carried the bag on my shoulder with natural elegance. I felt aligned inside and out, just as I wanted. It was a day to observe, listen, and adjust routes. I walked down the stairs with steady, measured steps. With each step, a silent determination was born. At 52, he no longer feared judgment. I learned to convert them into new fabric and better ideas. And, still without knowing, I got dressed for the day's test. The street received the first rays of light gently. Streetlights slowly went out, like discreet curtains. I walked to the corner coffee shop as usual. The barista smiled as he recognized me among a few customers. "A short espresso, please," I asked, unhurriedly. The aroma rose like an invitation to remember. I held the cup and reviewed part of my trajectory. So many fashion fairs, nights setting goals, suppliers, customers, employees, cut from the same cloth, everything aligned with the rule of respect and care. When paying, I left a tip and a note. "Thank you for remembering my request," I wrote quickly. Small recognitions have always been part of my thread. I believe that bonds are forged in minimal gestures. He smiled as he left, keeping the habit as a charm. Traffic began to make noise in the city. Buses, motorcycles, footsteps, shop windows igniting desires. I crossed the square where an old bandstand stood. I remembered when I designed the first collection as a teenager. "Clothes to embrace who you are," the draft said. The phone rang. It was the manager confirming schedules. "Everything is under control, Mrs. Vera. You can rest assured. Today I'll arrive discreetly, just to observe the room." "Perfect, the team is already in place," replied the manager. I felt, however, an anxious energy behind the words. I put away my cell phone and increased my pace. The storefront appeared elegant and inviting. Display cases with timeless pieces spoke of new things. Mannequins of different ages as a conscious choice. A silent message against any form of exclusion. Before entering, I paused briefly. I noticed two young women commenting on the looks in the window. Chic and comfortable, It looks like something a real woman would do. I smiled and sighed, goal well achieved. My brand stayed true to its purpose. I opened the door with the bell ringing softly. The air inside smelled of wood and cotton. In the background, light music marked the atmosphere. I blended in with the hangers, feigning shy familiarity. I wanted to see the service like any other visitor. I noticed the new employee adjusting a display, erect posture, eyes calculating every movement. I was talking to two colleagues in a promising tone. Words like rejuvenating the audience rang sharply. I kept the observation to myself and remained silent. Donna Rosa, the cleaning lady, appeared with the cart. His kind eyes recognized me immediately. I put my finger to my lips, asking for secrecy. She nodded, an experienced accomplice in that game, and he continued, discreetly. Polishing the floor to a shine, I chose a hanger and felt the texture of the silk. The new employee measured me with an icy gaze. There was an invisible gasp, an unspoken sentence. I saw the judgment in his hurried eyes. And, without knowing it, my morning was aligned with the first tear. I noticed how the new employee moved in a hurry. Her heels echoed firmly on the polished floor, as if marking her territory. She arranged hangers and display cases without looking to the sides. He spoke loudly to two colleagues, trying to show his knowledge. I watched her, silent, letting her words wash over me. I heard her say, "We have to rejuvenate the audience." The sentence sounded like a cold sentence in my ears. He smiled slightly, not with joy, but with irony. For years I had been arguing that fashion has no age. In that instant, I realized the battle that was coming. She noticed me standing there, examining a silk dress. Her gaze traveled over my face, my wrinkles, my hair. There was no kindness in that exam, only judgment. His lips curved into a lopsided smile, a smile that was already all too familiar to me. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice thick with impatience. There was a hint of disdain in every syllable. I nodded, still maintaining my discreet customer posture. I wanted to see how far his boldness would go. The game was just beginning, and I knew it. She walked over to me and straightened her posture. I tried to respond calmly. "I'm just looking." But his eyes swept my silhouette with disdain. "It's just that we work with modern pieces here, you know?" he said. "The public is younger, more in tune, you know?" The sentence pierced my patience like a needle. Still, I held the fabric tightly in my hands. I remembered how hard I fought to build that store. How many looks like hers have I had to go through? And as always, I responded with work, not arguments. She turned to a colleague and whispered loudly, "Some people come in just to look, right?" The comment had the right address, me. The colleague laughed softly, complicit in the malice. And in that instant, I felt the poison of humiliation rise. I remained calm, like someone who breathes before diving. But inside me, a discomfort grew. I wasn't just a client, I wasn't invisible. I owned that place, and she didn't know it. And right there lay the strength of my choice. I decided to walk around the store more, like any customer would. I ran my hand over the fabrics, testing the drape and colors. It was strange to walk there disguised, invisible in my own empire. I felt watched at every step, as if my presence was a nuisance to the employee. She approached again, this time without disguise. "Look, I don't think you'll find anything here." The word madam came out loaded with venom. There was less respect, more distance, a way to kick me out without touching me. I swallowed hard and took a deep breath. "Maybe I just want to take a look," I replied. My voice came out calm, even though it hurt inside. She raised her eyebrows mockingly. "You can look. But buying? It's hard to find something that fits." The comment hit me like a public slap, not because of the clothes, but because of the cruel intention. The humiliation was not in the words, but in the form. Customers around began to look discreetly. Some chuckled, others looked away. I wanted to scream who I was, show the office key, my name on the facade, but I chose silence as my strategy. I wanted to see how far her mask would go. Patience, at that moment, was my greatest luxury. Meanwhile, I noticed Donna Rosa, the cleaning lady. She pretended to clean the corners, but her eyes followed me. I knew exactly what was going on, and, in his wise way, he waited for the right moment. His complicity comforted me in silence. Carla, the employee, turned to me again. "If you want something, I recommend a simpler store." The words were spoken loudly, for all to hear. The blow of shame came down like a blade, and yet, I held firm to my role as spectator. My fingers tightened around the silk I was holding. The soft fabric contrasted with the roughness of the moment. My heart was racing, but my mind remained clear. I knew the scene was reaching its limit, and that, soon, The outcome would be inevitable. It was at that moment that I thought, until when? How long would women like me be diminished like this? Would age always be used as a weapon against us? Questions echoed louder than insults, and they became fuel for what was to come. The employee looked at me again with those sharp eyes. It was as if every detail of mine was a reason for mockery. I saw her look at my gray hair, then to the wrinkles that surrounded my restrained smile. Finally, for my clothes, analyzing them as someone who rejects them. That dress is not suitable for you. The word madam again carried venom. She used it as a weapon disguised as education. My blood ran cold, but I remained calm. I held the fabric tightly, as if it were a shield. I looked around and noticed customers watching the scene. A young couple whispered, looking sideways at me. An older lady looked away, embarrassed. The atmosphere seemed suffocating, filled with silent judgments. And I, the owner of that space, was treated like an intruder. She moved closer, lowering her voice. Here we work with fashion for modern women, you know? He made a point of emphasizing the word modern, as if I were an antique piece out of place, as if my time had already passed. My hands sweated, but my posture didn't waver. There was a contained storm inside me. I remembered how many closed doors I had faced, how many no's turned into victories with patience, and I realized this would just be another test. The sound of her heels echoed on the polished floor. Every step she took felt like a disguised attack, the way she styled. Her hair conveyed arrogance, and the way he smiled was an invitation to contempt. She wanted to drive me out with words, and I knew it. Still, I continued walking between the hangers. My fingers touched fabrics I had chosen myself, collections that were born from my perspective and my courage, and to think that there, at that moment, I was invisible. The paradox cut me like a silent razor. May I suggest another store for you? She smiled as if doing a favor, but his voice had a cold, merciless tone. I felt the blush rise to my face. It was the first open wound that morning. At the back of the store, I saw Donna Rosa once again. She pretended to sweep, but her eyes spoke volumes. There was solidarity in her silence, and a hidden certainty. It wouldn't last forever. The moment of truth was approaching. I decided to respond calmly, even though it hurt inside. I'm just looking, I don't need any help yet. My voice came out firm, but filled with patience. She raised her eyebrows in mock astonishment. Sure, but we don't have anything for your profile. The sentence hit me like an invisible punch. Profile? What did that mean, anyway? I didn't need any explanations. The message was clear. I wasn't young, and therefore, I wasn't a customer. The sentence echoed like a hammer inside my mind. The employee made a point of speaking loudly, so that everyone could hear. We have modern pieces for women who follow trends. Nearby customers chuckled softly, complicit in the poison. Others feigned indifference, but their eyes burned into me. I took a deep breath, swallowing the shame like a burden. I thought about revealing myself right there, in a quick gesture. Show my keys, my office, my power. But something in me said, wait, let it continue, let it reveal itself. The truth, when it arrives, is always stronger. Look, ma'am, maybe you'd feel better in popular stores. She smiled, showing teeth as sharp as her words. My breath caught for a moment. It was too cruel to hear that in my own store. And yet, I didn't allow my posture to give way. I touched another hanger, stroking the fabric tenderly. That piece represented years of effort and dedication. And now, it was used as a symbol of exclusion. My heart was racing, but my mind remained clear. The humiliation had not yet reached its peak. She took a step back, crossed her arms, and stared at me. What are you really looking for? We don't have women's clothing. The tone was laden with impatience and disdain. Each word was an invisible push toward the door, and I, in silence, decided to resist until the end. At that moment, I felt everyone's eyes on me. The entire room seemed suspended, waiting for my next move. My dignity was at stake, and I knew it. It wasn't just about me. It was about all women, about all those who had been told they were out of time. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. Donna Rosa stopped cleaning and looked directly at me. There was a quiet strength in that simple gesture. It was as if she was saying, hang in there, and so I held on. The worst was yet to come. I decided not to stand in silence any longer. I took a deep breath and looked the employee in the eye. Maybe you don't know who I am, I began to say. My voice came out firm, though thick with emotion. But before I could finish, she interrupted me. No need to explain yourself, ma'am. I understand. His tone was false, full of superiority. some customers come in just to look, but they don't buy. The phrase echoed through the hall like a poisonous whisper. My muscles contracted with pent-up indignation. I moved a little closer, still holding the silk in my hands. Listen, I think you're making a mistake. She rolled her eyes and chuckled softly. No, ma'am, I know exactly what I'm saying. The contempt on his face was like a blade. Nearby customers whispered among themselves. I could hear the muffled giggles, feel the stares. It was as if everyone there had chosen a side, and at that moment, I was the stranger in my own house. The humiliation was beginning to become collective. I wanted to scream, I wanted to point at the storefront, show my name, my signature, my story. But I swallowed that desire like someone swallowing a sob. There was something in me that still asked for silence. It was as if the scene needed to reach its limit. She crossed her arms and took a step back. The best thing you can do is leave. The shock ran through my body like a bolt of lightning. Me, the owner of that space, being kicked out of my own store, and yet I stood firm before her. My breathing was heavy, almost irregular. I held her gaze, as if staring at a wild beast. You have no idea who you're offending, he said. She raised her eyebrows and smiled contemptuously. Old women always think they are more important than they are. Those words were like stabs to my soul. The entire store seemed to stop for a moment. My throat burned with indignation and pain, but my hands remained firm on the fabric, and my mind, despite the suffering, remained clear. The hall was awkwardly silent. Customers stopped pretending they didn't see the scene. Now, everyone was following every word, every gesture. I felt like I was in the center of a cruel stage, where humiliation was the spectacle and I was the victim. Old lady, please understand. This is not your place, she said. The words echoed loudly, as if to ridicule me. I felt my face burn with shame and fury. A part of me wanted to run away from there immediately, but the other held me steady, like an invisible anchor. I looked around, searching for some trace of solidarity. The lady who had previously looked away was now staring at me. His eyes held a gleam of restrained empathy. But she was also trapped in fear of her surroundings. It was difficult to face the current of collective prejudice. The young couple laughed openly, without hiding it. The employee seemed to gain strength from this. She straightened her posture and smiled victoriously. It was as if every laugh was a medal, and I, more and more, became a target of that farce. It's scaring away the young, beautiful clientele, he said. The sentence cut through the air like a sharp razor. A group of girls turned to look, silent. Some frowned, others laughed nervously. The scene was about to become unbearable. My chest hurt, my breath was short, each word of hers weighed like a brick on me. But my mind clung to one idea: this story wasn't over yet. Not like that. I would not be destroyed there, in front of everyone. The employee gestured, pointing to the door. You can go, ma'am, this is not your place. The words were spoken loud and clear. My eyes welled up, but I held back the tears. I wouldn't let her see me break down. At that moment, I heard a different sound, the gentle drag of a cleaning cart. Donna Rosa, with her usual calm, approached. His eyes met mine, full of firmness, and something inside me immediately calmed down. She stopped beside me and said in a clear voice, "Good morning, Mrs. Vera, I've already cleaned your office." The silence that followed was deafening. The truth, finally, had been revealed, and her humiliation was about to turn. When I heard Donna Rosa's voice, my heart raced. "Good morning, Mrs. Vera, I've already cleaned your office," she said. The words hung in the air like suppressed thunder. I looked at her and saw complicity in her eyes. Finally, the silence was broken by the truth. The employee froze, without any immediate reaction. His arrogant smile faded in seconds. Customers looked at each other, stunned. The young couple who had been laughing now looked disconcerted. The entire store fell into absolute silence. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The truth was beginning to show itself, naked and clear. But along with the relief, the pain also came. I had been humiliated in my own home. And that wound would not heal easily. Carla, the employee, tried to laugh nervously. Is it, Mrs. Vera? I didn't know." Her voice trembled, and her face flushed. Her classmates looked at each other in shock. No one had the courage to say a word. I took a deep breath and released the fabric I was holding. My hands were shaking, but my posture remained straight. I looked at Donna Rosa and smiled in gratitude. She nodded silently, as if to say, "I knew it." And he returned to his service, with unshakable dignity. My presence, previously ridiculed, was now transformed, Every look that crossed my face carried astonishment and shame. I felt the energy shift, like a tide turning. The power that had been taken from me minutes before returned, and the truth could no longer be hidden. Yes, I own this store, I stated. My voice echoed through the hall firmly and clearly, and this is where I chose to invest my dreams. Words spoken not as a defense, but as an affirmation. It was time to take back what belonged to me, the employee stammered, searching for justifications. I thought. But there was no possible excuse for his arrogance. The silence of the customers weighed on her. It was as if everyone witnessed his downfall. My indignation was mixed with compassion, not for her, but for all women like me. How many have been humiliated just for existing? How many have been told they don't fit in somewhere? That scene was bigger than the two of us. The shock on Carla's face was clear. She tried to smile, but her eyes were trembling. I just wanted to impress the new boss, he muttered. The irony of the phrase went through me like fire. I was the boss, and she had treated me like dirt. Customers whispered, some indignant, others embarrassed. A young woman commented, "Oh my God, how embarrassing." Another customer just shook his head silently. The energy in the store was now completely different. The weight of the revelation crushed the employee. I approached her, feeling the solid ground beneath my feet. I looked deep into his confused eyes. "You wanted to kick me out of my own store." Every word came out with calm and authority, and each syllable seemed like a sentence of justice. She tried to justify herself once again. "I didn't know, really, it was a mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," I replied, interrupting her. "It was prejudice. It was a lack of respect." My tone was firm, but not shouting. I could see a reflection in the customers' faces. Some seemed relieved that I reacted this way. Others were still digesting what they had witnessed. It was as if each one had been confronted, and everyone became unwitting accomplices in that lesson. Carla lowered her eyes, not daring to look at him. Her silence was more revealing than an apology. The arrogance was gone, only emptiness remained. Meanwhile, I felt stronger. My inner voice was finally free. I approached the counter and rested my hands on it. This store was created for all women. I made a point of emphasizing each letter of the word. Youth is not a requirement, it is a phase. My words echoed like a manifesto. I looked at Dona Rosa, who smiled discreetly. His eyes said, "Now it's your turn to win." And I knew the time had come, not just to regain my dignity, but to transform that humiliation into a lesson. My decision had not yet been made, but the weight of the choice was in my hands. Punish or teach. Hurt or transform. I knew that this moment would define everything, and that from then on, nothing would be the same again. After I revealed myself, the entire room seemed to change. The looks that once judged me have now transformed. Some customers looked at me with restrained admiration, others, ashamed of having laughed or whispered. It was as if everyone was rethinking their attitudes. Carla, on the other hand, trembled before me. The pride she had displayed minutes before was gone. His eyes darted back and forth. They were looking for a way out, but they couldn't find one. The truth had her completely cornered. I took a deep breath and lifted my chin firmly. I didn't need to raise my voice to be heard. My silence was enough to command respect. Every second I remained calm weakened her, and every glance around reinforced the gravity of the scene. A lady came up and touched my arm. "Congratulations on your posture, my daughter," he whispered softly. Those words warmed me inside. I wasn't just defending myself, I was defending all those who have already been diminished. Carla tried to speak, but her voice failed. I didn't mean to," he began to say. I interrupted before he could make empty excuses. "Didn't want to? You did. You chose." I pointed to the hall, and everyone heard. She lowered her face, embarrassed. The blush on her cheeks betrayed her fall. The heavy silence of the store crushed her. No one dared to defend her. She was alone in her own error. I, on the other hand, felt empowered. There was still pain, but there was also power. My voice was now not just mine. It echoed in every corner of the store, and it had become a manifesto against exclusion. I turned to the customers and smiled slightly. "If anyone has ever made you feel invisible, know that this does not define who you are." The words came out of me effortlessly, and I could see emotion in some eyes. My dignity had been wounded, but not destroyed. There, in front of everyone, she emerged stronger, and with it also came responsibility. I knew there was still something left to do, and that the confrontation was not completely over. I took a few steps until I was in front of Carla. She shrugged like a frightened child. Her teary eyes begged for mercy, but my heart demanded firmness. I wouldn't let what she did to me go unpunished. You judged me by my age and appearance. My words came out slowly, each one a weight. He called me old, asked me to leave. I felt the hall tremble at my voice, and he did it in front of everyone here. She tried to justify herself again, but I cut her off. You don't need to say anything. I've already said enough. I looked around, including everyone in the dialogue. Humiliation doesn't just hurt the one who receives it, it exposes those who practice it to the world. A man, a longtime customer, raised his voice. She doesn't deserve to stay here, Mrs. Vera. Others murmured in agreement, reinforcing the idea. Carla lowered her head even further, and I felt the weight of the decision on me. My heart was racing, torn between two paths: say goodbye to her as exemplary punishment, or give him a chance to learn from his mistake. Which choice would do justice without losing humanity? This doubt burned inside me. I took a deep breath and held her gaze. If I take the easy way out, you're out. My words made his eyes widen, but I continued, the hard way is different. You stay. And you learn to respect each customer. The silence that followed was profound. Customers looked at each other, surprised by my choice. Carla looked up in disbelief. I didn't expect mercy, but I didn't expect a lesson either. I had turned the tables without having to shout. I'll give you a chance, Carla, I concluded, but know this is the last one. My tone was firm, leaving no room for doubt. She nodded, still trembling with embarrassment, and I felt that, in that moment, victory was mine. When I turned to the customers, I was applauded. The sound of applause filled the room like a hug. My chest swelled with pride and relief, not only for justice done, but for the example set. I had turned humiliation into respect. The clapping echoed like music inside me. It wasn't applause for Carla's humiliation. They were applauses for the way I chose to react. I had chosen dignity over revenge, and that, I realized, touched every person in that room. A young woman approached with teary eyes. Thank you, Mrs. Vera, for saying that out loud. I felt the sincerity in the tone of his speech. How many times must she have felt invisible too? My story reflected hers like a mirror. A longtime customer discreetly shook my hand. I have always admired your strength, but today I admire it even more. Your gesture gave me even more courage. It wasn't just about clothes, it was about respect, and respect wears better than any brand. I looked at Carla, still looking downcast and embarrassed. She was pale, as if carrying a huge weight. His eyes no longer held arrogance, only regret, and I realized that the lesson had already begun. Embarrassment was the mirror she needed. I turned to everyone and took a deep breath. This store belongs to you, to all of you. My voice came out firm, but thick with emotion. Fashion should not exclude, but embrace. And I saw many nodding, as if signing with me. The atmosphere, previously heavy and hostile, was now light. Customers smiled, some even cried discreetly. That moment had turned into collective catharsis. I wasn't just the store owner, I was the voice that echoed in every woman present. Carla approached with hesitant steps. I'm sorry, Mrs. Vera. Really? I stared at her for a few seconds in silence. His repentance seemed sincere, but fragile. Still, I realized the seed had been planted. Spontaneous applause filled the air again. It was as if each customer was hugging me with their hands. My heart warmed, but it also hardened. The scene would not be forgotten by anyone there, and I knew that day would change many things. When the noise stopped, I felt peace in my chest. My pain had turned into something bigger. My humiliation had turned into inspiration, and my store, as a symbol of resistance. It was just the beginning of a new purpose. With all eyes on me, I returned to the counter. My footsteps echoed firmly on the polished floor. I held onto the sides like someone holding onto a podium. I had a final decision to make, and she would define the future of everyone there. I looked at Carla, still huddled in herself. You made a serious mistake, Carla. My words sounded strong, but not cruel, not just with me, but with any client. She nodded, tears shining in her eyes. I could fire you right now, I continued. Some customers nodded in agreement, others watched intently, waiting for my next move. Carla swallowed hard, already preparing for the worst, but I took a deep breath and moved on differently. I'll give you a chance to learn. I saw surprise in her teary eyes. You will continue here, but in a different form. We'll treat each customer with absolute respect. And you will remember every day what happened." A murmur ran among the customers present. Some were surprised by my unexpected choice, others smiled, as if they understood the lesson. Carla cried softly, broken in her arrogance. Her victory was now my lesson to teach. I looked at everyone again, firm and serene. My store has never been just about clothes. She has always been about welcoming and valuing women. Whether young, mature, thin or any body type. Each of you has a place in here. The words filled the room with emotion. I felt that moment had become eternal. My clients would not forget what they witnessed, and Carla wouldn't forget her lesson either. The store would never be the same again. The weight lifted from my shoulders like a cloak. I had made the hardest decision, not to punish, but to transform. The real victory was in the change, and I felt like I had fulfilled my role. I smiled, not out of pride, but out of gratitude. Gratitude for resisting until the end, gratitude for having Donna Rosa by my side, gratitude for having recovered my voice, and for transforming pain into strength. When silence returned to the store, I felt my chest light. It was as if all the weight had been lifted. My humiliation had become a milestone, not just for me, but for everyone who witnessed it. I knew no one would forget that day. Customers began to approach, one by one. Some hugged me discreetly, others thanked me. Each gesture reinforced that my pain was not in vain. I was no longer just the store owner. I was a symbol of resistance and overcoming. Carla remained in the corner, huddled and crying. I looked at her and felt compassion, not because of your cruel words, but because of your ignorance. Her youth could still learn, and I chose to believe in the possibility of change. I walked to the window and stared out at the street. People passed by without knowing what had happened. Life went on outside, indifferent to my drama. But inside me, everything had changed. I was no longer the same Vera who had entered there. I turned to my team, now silent. "Remember, no one comes here to be put down." My voice came out firm, like a decree. Whoever passes through this door must come out bigger, never smaller. I saw heads nodding in agreement. With renewed respect, Donna Rosa passed me, smiling discreetly. His look said more than any words. Without her, the truth would not have come to light. I felt a deep gratitude for his quiet loyalty. I promised myself to value her even more from then on. Customers started leaving, but smiling. Some were still commenting. Touched by the scene, I realized the message had reached beyond the store. Each person would take that lesson with them, and it would spread like a seed. I sat at the counter, finally alone for a moment. I ran my hand over the fabric that had previously served as my shield. Now, he represented much more than fashion. It represented the strength to resist in the face of humiliation, and transform pain into power. I closed my eyes for a moment and smiled. I had found a new purpose. My store wouldn't just be a business. It would be a space of welcome and dignity, a refuge for all women. I got up determined. Feeling renewed, that day did not end in shame, but in victory. I had been called old, but I responded with greatness. And I understood, once and for all, true beauty lies in never giving up on yourself.